McLaren then moved northwards with his jeeps and linked up with Paddy Mayne at Termoli. The two groups and the commandos held the port until relieved. These operations showed that the SAS could operate closely with conventional forces as well as on its own. While this was going on, two other groups of two SAS were dropped in northern Italy to cut railway lines in an operation codenamed Speedwell. After blowing a number of bridges and viaducts, the raiders made epic treks through the mountains of Italy to reach the Allied lines further south. SAS operations continued in January 1944 in support of an attempt to outflank the formidable German defences of the Gustav Line. The Allies landed at Anzio, to the southwest of the Italian capital, and further groups of two SAS were dropped behind the lines to attack German communications in the region. In the event, this counted for little, as the Allies failed to exploit their initial success by rapidly advancing inland, and the Germans were able to contain the beachhead. While the SAS was operating in Italy, Earl Jellicoe and the Special Boat Squadron had been busy in the Aegean, often using fishing boats as transport. In one of the few SAS operations that was actually filmed, the SBS took advantage of the Italian surrender in September 1943 to make landings on islands in the Dodecanese, bringing the Italian garrisons onto their side. Further reinforcements were sent, but the British lacked the resources to sustain the garrisons on the islands. The Germans launched attacks on them and seized them back, one by one, during the first half of 1944. The SBS suffered a number of casualties during these attacks, but continued its raiding operations in the Aegean. In the spring of 1944, the SAS was enlarged to brigade size and concentrated in Britain to prepare for the invasion of France. The Special Raiding Squadron became one SAS regiment, and two SAS was brought back from Italy in March. The original French troop was augmented by two parachute battalions and became 3 and 4 SAS regiments. With the addition of a Belgian parachute company as 5 SAS, the Special Air Service was now some 2,500 men strong. Their task was to be dropped into central France and cooperate there with the French secret army, the Maquis, in attacks on German communications. The first SAS teams were deployed during the early hours of D-Day. The woods and forests in the area proved excellent cover for the SAS teams and their jeeps. Using intelligence gathered by the Maquis, SAS jeep patrols mounted numerous attacks on German bases. A favorite tactic was to drive at speed through a German-occupied village, blasting away at houses being used as billets or storage. These raids helped to tie down German troops who could have otherwise been sent to join the battle in Normandy. One group was given the unusual job of assassinating Rommel at his HQ in northern France. They dropped on the 25th of July, not realizing that Rommel had been badly wounded in an air attack a week earlier and was back in Germany. The Germans reacted to the SAS attacks by mounting sweeps of the woods in which they were hiding. Sometimes the SAS was caught by surprise and had to fight desperate rearguard actions as they tried to extricate themselves. One group of 35 SAS men operating in the Poitiers region in early July 1944 were totally surrounded. Almost all those who survived the firefight that followed were captured. One wounded SAS man was beaten to death with rifle butts, while 30 others, together with an American airman, were shot in cold blood. In spite of disasters like this, the SAS operations in the French countryside played their part in disrupting the German rear areas and helping the Allied breakout from Normandy and subsequent rapid advance across France. But with the liberation of France, the scope for independent operations deep in enemy territory declined dramatically, especially once the Allied advance slowed because of overstretched supply lines. It seemed to some in the British High Command that the SAS no longer had a relevant role. Partly to deflect these, an SAS squadron returned to Italy in the autumn of 1944. There was more scope for the type of operation they excelled in, and small parties were dropped in the north of the country to assist the partisans. The SAS men helped to carry out attacks on communications, although German retaliation was often bitter. The SBS enjoyed a happier time towards the end of 1944, when they took part in the liberation of the Greek mainland. But despite these attempts to find useful employment for it, by the beginning of 1945 the future of the SAS was looking doubtful. One squadron was selected for counterintelligence duties in Germany, especially hunting down war criminals. 1 and 2 SAS were earmarked for the liberation of Norway, but the Allied strategy was to leave the large German garrison there until after Germany itself had been overrun. In the meantime, there seemed to be little for the SAS to do. In March 1945, Brigadier Mike Calvert took command of the SAS Brigade. As a veteran of the Chindit operations in Burma, he was an expert in deep penetration raiding and a forceful advocate for his new troops. After much debate, he obtained agreement that they should spearhead the advance of 21st Army Group east of the Rhine. Five squadrons took part in the final advance, acting as screening forces for the 1st Canadian and 2nd British Armies. But the lightly armoured SAS jeeps were very vulnerable to ambushes and suffered a number of casualties. It was in one of these ambushes that the redoubtable Paddy Mayne had his last fight of the war. He came to the rescue of one of his patrols which was in trouble and forced the Germans to withdraw through the ferocity of his fire. This earned Mayne his 4th Distinguished Service Order. The SAS jeep patrols finally reached the German naval base at Kiel. As the men gazed in amazement at the destruction caused by Allied bombing to the port and the naval vessels based there, other SAS patrols were sweeping east and north as the war came to an end.